I'll start with this. I'm not the kind of person who gets easily spooked. I've solo camped through parts of Appalachia, backpacked through abandoned mining towns, even spent a night in the skeleton of a gutted Greyhound bus once. But nothing, and I mean nothing, has ever stuck with me like what I went through that night in the woods. It was supposed to be a casual weekend hike. The trail was just off Route 22, in a less trafficked stretch of state forest in southern Ohio. I'd seen it mentioned on an old forum for forgotten trails, one of those places that don't show up on GPS and haven't been maintained in years. Just overgrown logging roads, rusted signposts, and decaying hunting blinds. The kind of place where sea service dies and silence settles in like a second skin. I didn't even tell anyone I was going. Dumb, I know. I figured I'd hike in a few miles, set up camp, and head out the next morning. Just a quick overnight to clear my head. But by early evening, I realized I was completely turned around. The trail had vanished behind me, swallowed up by thickets and gullies. My compass kept spinning like it was drunk. And worst of all, the sun was bleeding out fast behind the trees. I kept walking, hoping I'd hit a road or a ridge with a view. I didn't. Instead, I found the van. It looked wildly out of place in the woods. This bright blue Amazon delivery van parked at a weird angle in a small clearing. There was no road, no tire tracks, and no trail leading to it. Just trees and moss and the unsettling quiet of the deep forest. At first, I thought maybe someone had crashed it or dumped it. But it wasn't wrecked. The body was clean, no broken glass, no dents. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, creaking faintly when the breeze caught it. I admit, I hesitated. But night was closing in, and the idea of sleeping out in the open was worse. Bears, coyotes, whatever. I figured I'd poke around, make sure it was really abandoned, and hunker down in the back. I stepped inside. The air was stale, damp, like old paper and mildew. The dashboard still had a phone mount with a dead GPS unit. The seats were intact, no blood, no obvious signs of a struggle, just empty. I climbed into the cargo bay and immediately saw something that made my stomach turn. Packages, dozens of undelivered boxes stacked along the interior walls. Some were still sealed, but others had torn labels, faded barcodes, and handwritten notes like "front porch" or "dog will bark." The dates? All of them were from last summer. August 18th, 2023. August 20, 2023. August 22. It was now late October, and judging by the moss and leaves that had started growing into the van's wheels, it hadn't moved in weeks, maybe months. Still, I told myself, someone must have just gotten stuck. Maybe it was stolen and abandoned. I set up my sleeping bag in the back and tried not to think too hard. I clicked on my headlamp, cracked a protein bar, and tried to ignore the way the wind seemed to die the moment I closed the van door behind me. That was the first night I heard the knocking. The sound came just after midnight. 3 knocks, soft, measured, on the metal back doors of the van. Knock, knock, knock. I froze mid-chew. The last bit of protein bar went dry in my throat. I waited, listening. Nothing but the tick of my headlamp and the faint hum of distant wind. Then, knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm, same location right behind me. I turned, slowly, barely daring to breathe. I had propped my flashlight against one of the boxes, casting a wide arc of light across the cargo bay. Nothing moved. No shadows passed across the light. Just silence. I crept to the back doors and pressed my ear against the cold metal. Nothing. I waited maybe 10 minutes before convincing myself it had been a tree branch or a squirrel, or maybe even my imagination. The forest could play tricks on you, especially when you were alone, tired, and on edge. Still, I grabbed my small hatchet and kept it next to me as I zipped into my sleeping bag. Eventually, I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was still dark, but not night dark. more like a heavy pre-dawn fog. The kind that makes the world feel muted and distant, like you're seeing it through frosted glass. I unzipped the door flap and saw that condensation had covered the inside of the van windows. Thick, streaky, and oddly smeared, as if someone had tried to wipe it away from the outside. That unsettled me. I hadn't noticed any dew the night before. I leaned in closer, and that's when I saw it. The handprint, right there on the interior glass behind the driver's seat. Small, slender, fingers stretched too long, pressed from inside the van. I scrambled out of my bag so fast I knocked over the light. I swear the temperature in the van dropped 10 degrees in a second. My breath came out in fogged huffs, and the hair on my arms stood straight up. I checked the doors, still locked, windows unbroken. No signs of anyone having come in or out. That should have been my cue to leave, but I didn't. My brain kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe the print had been there when I arrived and I just hadn't noticed. Maybe some old moisture pattern tricked my eyes. Maybe. I stayed one more night. That was my biggest mistake. The second night was colder and quieter. Too quiet. Even in the deep woods, you usually hear something. Bugs, birds, creaking branches. But this was a dead silence. The kind that presses in from all sides, like the forest itself is holding its breath. I sealed the van doors, wedged them shut with some delivery boxes, and sat awake for hours, just listening. The knocking didn't come at midnight this time. It came at 3:17 a.m. I remembered the time exactly, because I had my watch face turned toward me, counting the minutes until dawn. But this time, the knocking wasn't on the van. It was underneath it, faint tapping, like someone was crawling under the frame and knocking upward into the floor. Knock, knock. Pause, then again, knock, knock, knock. I held still, barely breathing. The sound moved, like someone scraping along the undercarriage, then pausing to tap again. I wanted to run, wanted to throw open the doors and sprint into the woods. But where would I even go? I was lost. No trail, no compass, no moonlight. Only the van between me and whatever was knocking. Then, the worst part. The van began to rock, just slightly, back and forth, like someone was pushing it from one side or maybe climbing on top. My flashlight flickered. The beam cut across the stacked packages, then died completely. That's when I heard the voice. Faint, like it was being whispered through a radio tuned to the wrong frequency. Undelivered, undelivered. The van stopped rocking. The floor creaked beneath me. From the inside, something had gotten in. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Something was inside the van. I knew it. Felt it in the shift of air, the subtle pressure change, like a living thing had just entered a small room. The cargo bay stretched maybe 12 feet behind me, but in that moment, it felt like a coffin. Stillness, utter stillness. Then, creak. A soft weight pressed down near the front of the van, just past the driver's seat. Not a box falling, not a mouse scurrying. Something heavier. Something slow. Creak, creak, creak. Footsteps. I kept my hand wrapped tight around the hatchet's handle, sweat dripping from my palms. My flashlight was dead, and the backup I'd packed had vanished from where I set it, gone without a sound. In the darkness, I could just barely make out the silhouette of the boxes. They were still stacked haphazardly, but one of them, just one, had been opened. The flaps curled outward, and something moved inside. I leaned closer without meaning to. My breath hitched. It was a stuffed animal, a cheap plush fox, orange and worn, but its face wasn't facing me. It was turned toward the corner, as if it were looking at something I couldn't see. Its little plush hands rested against the cardboard like it had climbed out on its own. That's when I noticed the side of the box. Written in smeared black marker, hasty, frantic, were the words, "Reinter to sender." I backed away and bumped into something behind me. Not a box, something warm. I spun around and swung the hatchet blindly, but there was nothing there. Just the van wall, cold steel, empty. I started breathing again, too fast, too loud. I pressed my ear against the side door, ready to bail, even if it meant getting lost in the woods. Then, just as I reached for the handle, undelivered. The whisper came again, but this time it was closer. Undelivered package. I looked down. At my feet sat another box, one I hadn't seen before. It hadn't been there when I laid down to sleep, I was sure of it. The cardboard was different, older, water damaged, taped at the edges, but the tape had yellowed and curled. There was no label, no barcode, no destination. Just a single word scrawled in ink across the top. You. I didn't touch it. I didn't breathe. I just stared. Then the box began to twitch. Once, then again, like something inside was alive and stirring. That was it. I bolted. I kicked open the back doors, the boxes crashing behind me as I jumped out into the cold forest air. My boots slipped on the wet leaves, and I nearly cracked my head on a root, but I didn't care. I ran. Branches lashed at my arms and face, my breath burned in my lungs, but I didn't stop. Not until I reached a clearing. A wide, empty meadow, under a gray, pre-dawn sky. The light was just beginning to return, but there were no birds, no wind, no sound, only the van. It was there, sitting perfectly still, exactly where it had been. I had run in a wide circle, back to the same place. I collapsed to my knees. I thought maybe I was hallucinating, but then I saw something else, something new. The rear doors were open, not how I left them, wider, like someone had opened them from the inside. And next to them, just outside the van, sat another package. This one was larger. The cardboard looked newer, taped shut, labeled. I crept closer, not because I wanted to, but because it felt like I had to, like I was being pulled. The shipping label was printed in clean black text. No barcode, just a destination. Dead letter facility, lot 7, and beneath it, in place of the name, undelivered soul. I looked up, and standing in the trees behind the van, half obscured in the fog, was a figure. Tall, unmoving, no face, just a silhouette draped in something that looked like a black courier's coat. He didn't move. He didn't need to. He just watched. I wanted to scream, but the air felt thick in my lungs, like syrup, like I wasn't supposed to make noise in that place. The figure in the woods didn't move. He was just watching, the way a security camera watches, without emotion or intention. But I could feel it, that presence, that pressure. I backed away from the van step by step, careful not to trip or blink. As I moved, I kept my eyes on the package labeled Undelivered Soul, because it was ticking, faint but unmistakable. Tick. I turned and ran, again. But this time, I didn't look back. I don't know how far I went, maybe a mile, maybe more, but I didn't stop until I hit pavement, a narrow gravel road I hadn't seen on the map. There was no sign, no shoulder, just worn tire grooves carving through the fog. I followed it. Eventually, it led to a gate. It was old, rusted. The paint had peeled to the metal years ago. There was a sign bolted crookedly to the top bar. The dead letter facility, lot 7, no public access. I don't know why I stopped. Any sane person would have turned around and kept running, but something about the words froze me in place. Dead letters. As in, mail that never made it, mail that had no sender and no recipient, forgotten, returned, destroyed. I pushed the gate open. It creaked like a scream, and the fog on the other side swallowed me. The facility was barely more than a few long shipping containers stacked in an L shape with a rusted trailer in the center. A single yellow light flickered over the doorway. Beside it, another package, sitting alone. This one wasn't labeled, but the tape had been peeled back, half open. Inside was a mirror. Just a small hand mirror, cracked in 3 places. The glass was fogged with condensation, and when I reached out and wiped it clean, I saw, not myself, something else. It looked like me. Same hair, same eyes, same jacket. But it wasn't. It was smiling, and it mouthed something I couldn't hear, something I didn't want to hear. I dropped the mirror and stepped back, straight into someone standing behind me. I spun around, swinging my arms wildly, but there was no one there. Just cold air, empty fog. But now, the door to the trailer was open, and the light inside had turned red. I don't remember walking in, I just remember being inside. The walls were plastered with return labels, thousands of them, all stuck like paper ivy, curling at the edges, marked with words like, "Are rejected," "Insufficient soul," "Sended deceased," "Exists in multiple realms." It was freezing inside, but I was sweating. There were no people, no guards, no phones, but there were packages, dozens of them, all arranged neatly on shelves with signs above them. Class 1, corrupted. Class 2, hostile. Class 3, Minix. Class 4, occupied. Each box had a little slot on the front, a viewing window. Some of them were fogged with frost, others were twitching. Some pulsed like they were breathing. I passed one labeled, "Seen through 24/sender, unknown/contains, laughter in the dark." Inside was nothing but darkness. But when I pressed my ear to the glass, I heard giggling, small, childlike. Except it didn't stop, not even when I moved away. It followed me. At the far end of the trailer was a desk, and behind that desk sat a man. He wasn't the figure from the woods, no. This one wore a faded blue postal uniform, wrinkled, frayed at the seams. His name tag read, Bennett. He was sorting through papers with mechanical movements, one hand signing slips, the other stamping them with something that hissed like steam. His face was tired, hollow. "Wrong place," he said without looking up. "You're not supposed to be here." "I didn't mean to," I said, barely above a whisper. He finally looked up. His eyes were red, not irritated, glowing. "You opened a package that wasn't yours," he said, voice flat. "Now you're part of the system." He slid a clipboard toward me. It had a single form, a delivery request. At the bottom was an address, my own, and a checkbox. And sent to become courier. I didn't touch it. "I don't want any part of this." Bennett leaned forward, his breath curling in the air like smoke. "Doesn't matter. The package was marked for you. That means it's yours now." "What package?" He pointed behind me. I turned, and there it was, sitting on the floor. The same box from the van, the one labeled, "You." I stared at the box on the floor. It hadn't been there a second ago. But now, sitting in the red light of the trailer, it looked different, bigger, wetter. Like the cardboard itself was pulsing with something alive inside. And the label wasn't printed anymore, was carved with something sharp and uneven, like fingernails. "To you, from the wrong place." I backed away instinctively. Bennett just kept watching, his red eyes steady. "If you don't deliver it," he said, "it'll open itself." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not touching that thing." "Then you'll carry it another way." The lights flickered again, the temperature dropped. And then, like something in the trailer exhaled, All the other packages around me began to tremble, a slow, dreadful chorus of movement and breath. I turned to run, but the trailer door was gone, just wall, seamless and rusted. Behind me, I heard the tape peel off the box. And then, the voice. It came from inside the box, but also from inside my head. Like it wasn't speaking to me, but through me. "We missed you, courier. You didn't finish the last route, so we brought it back." I collapsed to my knees. Something warm ran down my nose. Blood, maybe, but I couldn't wipe it. My limbs felt locked in place, like I'd been paralyzed by a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The box unfolded. Not opened. Unfolded. Like reality was just a piece of paper, and someone had creased it wrong on purpose. Inside wasn't darkness. It was a hallway. A long corridor stretching into nothing, walls lined with more boxes, more packages. Some were screaming, some were whispering, and one had my voice. It was reciting a conversation I had with my mom in high school. Verbatim, like it had recorded a piece of my life and filed it away. Bennett stepped beside me, calm and slow, like a priest at a funeral. "You've already been down this hallway before," he said softly. "You just don't remember it." "What is this place?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a delivery scanner. Old, cracked, the kind UPS drivers used back in the early 2000s. He held it out to me. The screen blinked once. Sackage, soul unclaimed. The destination, the threshold. "What's the threshold?" I whispered. Bennett didn't blink. "The place where forgotten things gather, where dead letters wait to be read." The hallway inside the box was glowing now, pulsing with red light, and I could feel it pulling on me. Not physically. Something deeper, memory maybe. Or fate. And somewhere, beneath all of it, I heard footsteps. The man in the woods. He was coming. Through the box. Through the system. And Bennett looked terrified. "You have to go," he said, "now, before he marks you again." "Who is he?" I asked, but I already knew. The one who sorts souls, the one who waits at the end of undelivered routes, the one that finds you when the package is yours. The last courier. I took the scanner. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me accepted that I wasn't escaping this place, that whatever I had found in that van wasn't just a haunted object or some demonic glitch in reality, but a route, a job, a debt. Bennett handed me a parcel, this one wrapped in waxy paper, tied with barbed wire. The tag on it was blank. "I can't go with you," he said. "I'm already expired." "Expired?" He nodded, tapped his chest. I noticed then, no breath, no steam in the cold. He was long gone. Just a clerk, sorting the unsortable. Ah. Behind me, the hallway groaned. I stepped inside, and immediately felt the rules change. Time slowed, sound blurred. My shoes sank an inch deeper with every step, like I was walking across unfinished thoughts. The corridor bent in impossible ways. Some turns were vertical, some sideways. Gravity was a choice here, not a law. And all the while, the parcels whispered as I passed. "He knows your name. You saw him before you were born. You're not delivering, you're returning." I turned one corner and found myself standing in front of a house. My childhood house, exactly as it was in the 90s. I tried to move past it, but the scanner beeped. Delivery stop. Concluded recipient. Mom. I looked down. The waxy parcel in my hands was gone, replaced with a package I remembered seeing under our Christmas tree one year. The one I never got to open because we had to evacuate the house after that weird gas leak. That same year I got sick. I dropped it on the porch and stepped away. Behind the curtains I saw my mother. younger, happy, humming to herself. Then she looked up and saw me, not as I am, but as the thing I'd become in the corridor. And she screamed. I ran, or at least I tried to, but in that corridor, time is syrup and memory is a wall. Every step forward drags you deeper into yourself. You pass your past selves. You glimpse your regrets in shattered mirrors lining the corners. And worst of all, you never stop hearing the packages. I don't mean the tape pelling or the cardboard shifting. I mean their voices. Each parcel had something to say. Secrets, sins, moments I'd buried. Some screamed in terror. Others whispered my name like it was a curse. But they all said the same thing in the end. You can't return what you've already become. I didn't want to deliver anything else. I didn't want to see anything else, but I knew the system wouldn't let me leave until I finished the route. So I walked. Hours, days. Time meant nothing there. Eventually I reached a final door. Not a porch, not an apartment, just a massive, corroded steel gate carved into the wall of the corridor. It looked older than anything I'd ever seen. Older than stone, older than memory. A sign hung crooked above it. Dead drop, last chariot order. The scanner beeped in my hand. Final delivery ready. Possession, null, contents, unclaimed self. The package was in my hands again. But it wasn't a box this time. It was me. A version of me, bound in burlap and twine, unmoving, but breathing shallowly. Its face was hidden, but I could feel the heartbeat, could feel the weight of what it was. Everything I had ignored, everything I had refused to become. A shadow self, and something inside the gate stirred. Footsteps, heavy, measured, unavoidable. Then he appeared, the man from the woods. But now I saw him clearly, towering, thin as a rail, his delivery vest covered in blood-stained barcodes. His face was a blur of all the people I'd failed. His eyes were blank shipping labels, and from his back protruded a twisted dolly made of bone and wire, dragging behind him the broken forms of other failed couriers. The last carrier. He didn't speak. He just raised a hand, palm out, and I knew what he wanted. My final delivery, the unclaimed version of me. I looked down at it, at him. The bound figure shifted, slowly, just a twitch of the hand. Its mouth opened beneath the burlap and whispered one word, "Please." And that's when I understood what the route had been all along. Not a delivery to someone, but for myself. One last chance to send away what I had carried too long. Shame, guilt, memory. The self I'd buried in order to keep moving, to deliver on time. Bennett had said I'd already walked this hallway before. He was right. I'd been carrying this version of myself since the first time I ignored the screams behind a customer's door. Since the first time I delivered a package with red leaking from its seams. I stepped forward, handed the shadow self to the last carrier. He nodded, slow and solemn, like a judge accepting a verdict. Then he vanished. No flash of light, no smoke. Just gone. The steel gate cracked open. A rush of warm air swept through me. Like a breath, yes, but also like a release. And when I stepped through, I was back. The forest, night, cold air. I was standing next to the Amazon van again. But now it was burned out, blackened, like it had sat in fire for decades. Its logos were peeled off. Its doors were sealed with rust. The cargo area had caved in, and on the windshield, scrawled in soot, "Delivery complete." I stumbled back toward the road, heart thudding. My car was still there. Time had passed. My phone buzzed with dozens of missed messages. My wife, my friends, work. But no one mentioned the police or fire or anything about the van. As if it never happened. I sat in the car and stared at the empty road. And then my phone buzzed again. A notification from an app I didn't remember installing. Delivery route routed assigned. Tite 2:13 a.m. Address forward memory lane. Recipient unknown. I deleted the app, but the notification stayed. Right under the time, 2:07 a.m., 6 minutes. I don't know what happens if I ignore it, but I know what happens if I answer it. The corridor comes back. The scanner reboots, and the route continues. Once you carry the undeliverable, you never stop, and the system never forgets its couriers.